Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilma. Allahumma aftah ilayna hikmatak wanshur 'alayna rahmatak ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Wa na'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Is there any questions that we have from the previous session? Because there was one question that was asked by the sisters, and I think I did not do it justice by explaining it fully. I thought maybe I could address that before we start.
No, I don't have any at the moment.
Okay, so Zainab had asked that how exactly does the Quran use or emphasize the language of the Akhirah? How does it push forward an Akhirah-oriented language? So if you remember, we talked about language and we said that there are two forms that the language takes. There's the physical, tangible form that it takes in terms of script and writing, in terms of sound and speech. And that's where the huruf come into play. And then there is the essential form, which takes the form of the meanings. So you've got the symbolic, semantic form of language, which we use in the outward form, in the outward sense. And that's where different languages come into play, like English and Arabic and Urdu and Swahili and so on and so forth. And then all these languages have essential meanings. And so irrespective of what language you speak, we all have a common understanding of the meanings of what we are speaking about. And it's just the execution of it in a particular language that the other person would want to understand. If they are speaking the same language as you, they can understand it. So the meaning of the language, it's all about how that meaning is executed. And when if you want to do this as an experiment, I would strongly urge you to do this when you're watching a movie or some of these commercials. Look beyond the physical form of the language that they use, the English language. Look beyond that and analyze what sort of meaning is being propelled from that language. What essentially is the concept that's being delivered? What are they trying to say? Because when you look at the Quran, even though it's executed in the Arabic language, the content, the essence of the speech that's being spoken, it's always speaking about a return to your Lord. It's always speaking about a raja'a to him. And the beauty of the language that is executed by the Quran is that it has got no logical fallacy in it. It is rhetorically sound. There is no rhetorical error in it. And it always speaks in universals. Now, the human mind and the heart, which we said, is from the alam al-amr, is not from the alam al-khalq, which means that the mind and the heart do not partake in the particularities of this physical material world where phenomena is always occurring. The mind and the heart are oriented towards understanding universals, because as a principle we say if you understand a universal concept, then it is very easy for you to decipher any particularity as it occurs. So that if your mind is oriented towards recognizing an akhirah, and always thinking about an akhirah, always contemplating your existence in this world as a temporal existence, then every particular you see in the physical world, you will be able to decipher whether or not this is a particular that is orienting you towards that akhirah, or it is only a particular that is with regards to this physical world of matter and material. And so this is what Ghazali is saying in the ayah that he quotes from Surah Al-Dhariyah, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, and I did not create the jinn or mankind except but to serve and to worship me. And he says, وَمَعْنَاهَا, its meaning, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْقَلْبِ, we created the heart, وَأَعْطَيْنَاهُ الْمُلْكَ وَالْعَسْكَرِ, and we gave it a dominion and troops. وَجَعَلْنَا النَّفْسَ مَرْكَبَهُ, and we placed the soul as its vessel, as its container, as its rider, as its beast. حتى يسافر عليه من عالم التراب إلى أعلى عليين, such that until it begins this journey and it journeys from this world of turab, of soil, of dirt, of material, of matter, to the highest of the high. If you orient yourself with the language of the Quran in its deliverance, in its meaning, then you will cultivate your thoughts in accordance to that direction. Because we say that language defines thoughts, and then thoughts is how you perceive the world, or how you project your worldview, and how you thus cultivate it accordingly. So I'll give you an example from the language difference itself. In English, the word reality comes from the Latin word reas, which means primarily it means matter, and then it means goods, it also means property, it also means thing. So those are the four essential meanings of the word reas, from which the English word reality is derived from. So right there you can see in the English language, the meaning of reality is related to material things or property or goods or matter. But when you look at the Arabic language, the meaning of thing is shay'un, right? But the meaning of reality is haqiqa. And haqiqa is from haq. And there is only one haq, which is your Lord. He is the truth. So when you orient yourself according to the language of the Quran, then you will be orienting yourself towards the truth. And that's not just to limit it towards the Arabic language. It's with regards to the essential meaning of the Quran, not just the form that it takes. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we sent down this Quran, Quranan Arabiyan, as an Arabic Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you can intellect. Because of the inflectious ability of the Arabic language and its syntactic fluidity, you are able to expand your understanding and expand your understanding in its semantic fields as well. The Arabic language has a much, much broader vocabulary than the English language. And in linguistics, we say that the more words you learn, the more meanings you unravel, your brain actually creates new neural pathways and networks. In other words, your brain capacity increases, and that allows you to have a broader understanding, a broader intellection. Because the more strong the brain is as an instrument, the better you are able to think. And insofar as the knowledge base is concerned, the knowledge of the dunya is only confined to the dunya, the knowledge of physicality, and that extends to the boundaries of the physical material universe. That's as far as that knowledge extends. The other worlds have a much vaster field of knowing, and those things cannot be known by the physical sciences that we apply. So the language that is used in academics primarily is only limited to a material understanding of this world. Beyond that, you need a language that will expand your scope of understanding. And that's what the Quran does. The Quran emphasizes on the akhirah as there is much more to know than just your material sciences. And I hope that answers that particular question. And I know it's confusing also, but as we go along, inshallah, you'll be able to understand better and better what that actually entails. So Imam Al-Ghazali says, فَإِذَا أَرَادَ أَن يُؤَدِّي حَقَّ هَذِهِ النِّعْمَةِ. So if the heart wants to fulfill this right of the ni'mah, that Allah, this is the ni'mah that He has allowed the human being, or He's given the human being an opportunity to detach from this material world and to rise to the highest of the high. Now, the evidence for this is in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 30. So if you can open this up and just follow along with what I'm going to explain in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 30 and 31. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. He said unto the angels that I am going to place in this ard a khalifa. Now ard A lot of people look at Ard and they think planet Earth only. It's not limited to planet Earth. One of the early meanings of Ard was related to material, to matter, or to a world of causality, what we would today call the observable universe. What Ghazali calls Alam al-Shahada, the observable world or the observable universe. So the angels question this. أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا. Now note that when they're saying this, they're saying it twice. أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَفْسِكُ الدِّمَاء. Are you going to place someone in this world, someone who is going to cause fasad and who is going to shed blood? Why are they pointing to these two things only? Why are they specifically focused on the fasad and the bloodshedding? If you look, both fasad and yufsikud dima, the shedding of blood, both these are related to the shahwa and the ghadab. The ultimate resultant of the shahwa that is left unchecked, uncontrolled, is fasad, because the more you consume, the more you are going to ruin the natural state or the natural balance or the natural boundaries that Allah has placed. So He's allowed the human being to consume. And He's also said that these are the limits. But if you do not control yourself, then look at the state of the world as it is today. The overconsumption that results in, when they're talking about climate change and global warming, they make it sound like it's an enemy. But it's not an enemy, it's their own deeds coming back to them. Their factories that pollute the air, their machinery that spill all the toxins and the chemicals in the waters, the uncontrollable lust for wanting things that ultimately end up in landfills. This is the fasad, because you cannot control your consumerism, that urge to just want more and more and more. And then you look at Yufsikud dima, the shedding of blood. What does anger ultimately result in? It results in discourse, in rage, in fighting, in killing, and the shedding of blood. This is the norm of the world of physicality, because it is a world of phenomena. It's always a world of turbulence. And in this world of turbulence, you have this constant shift between the lower animalistic instincts of this world, because this is what animals do. And so the human being has been given these qualities, and this is what Ghazali says, these are qualities. They are necessary for your existence in this world, but you have to be able to control them. So the angels then said, وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ. But we are in this maqam that you have created us as spiritual beings. We are always in a state of glorifying you, bihamdika, with praise, وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ, and always we are sanctifying you. Because that's what a spiritual being would do. If you are in that maqam of spirituality that the angels are in, then the only thing you can do is to glorify Allah. So the qualities of the angelic qualities is what the heart seeks. As Ghazali said, that it is something that is divine, in the sense that it is not a bestial thing, right? لِأَنَّهُ جَوْهَرٌ عَزِيزٌ. It is a precious essence. مِنْ جِنْسِ جَوْهَرِ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. From the genus, from the category of the angelic essence. And that's what the heart is always seeking, because its true contentment is in ma'rifatullah, in knowing its Lord, and to hence praise its Lord and sanctify its Lord. And so then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to them, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. I know that which you do not, because this creature that I'm going to create is actually going to have the ability to rise up. And so وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. He imprinted, he inspired, he taught Adam the names of all. And it is with this unique attribute that mankind is able to rise up, because it is through the naming of things that we are able to understand things. In logic, we have what's known as quiddity, the first instinctive mode of questioning, which is termed as what is it? In Arabic, it's mahiyatun, knowing the itness of the thing. Because you want to, when you question what is it and you get a name and a definition from that, it's the name and the definition that help you understand what the thing is. And it is through knowing the thing and through knowing the rest of the things in creation that we then come to know the one who created everything. So it is this process that we go through of learning and acquiring knowledge that eventually takes us to a rank of ma'rifah. And that is the spiritual level. One of the scholars said about the aql, al-aqlu adnahu taraka dunya wa a'lahu taraka tafakkur fi dhatillah. That where true intellection begins is when it has detached from the world, when it has detached from causality, when it is not fixated anymore on the causes and effects and the semantics and particulars. That's when true intellection begins. And its limit is in trying to comprehend the nature of God. That's where the limit lies, because you cannot comprehend God. But true intellection, this is what we are concerned with, not the limit. We're concerned with this portion. True intellection begins when you detach from this world. And how do you detach from this world? You improve your ability to understand reality. And you recognize that there is a higher and a greater reality than this physical reality. So he says, فَإِذَا أَرَادَ أَن يُؤَدِّي حَقَّ هَذِهِ النِّعْمَةِ. If it wants, the heart wants to fulfill the right of this ni'mah that Allah has given mankind, the ability to rise up and ascend to the spiritual heights. جَلَسَ مِثْلَ السُّلْطَانِ فِي صَدْرِ مَمْلَكَتِهِ. All it has to do is to sit like a king, like a sultan, in the midst of its dominion. وَجَعَلَ الْحَضْرَ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ قِبْلَتُهُ وَمَقْصِدُهُ. It has to place this divine presence as its destination, its qibla, and its maqsad, its goal and ambition. وَجَعَلَ الْآخِرَ وَطَنُهُ وَقَرَارَهُ. It has to place the akhirah as its abode and its final resolution. وَالنَّفْسُ مَرْكَبَهُ. The nafs, the soul, is its vessel. وَالدُّنْيَا مَنْزِلَهُ. And this dunya is just a way station for it, because it recognizes that it is on a journey, and this is a temporal place of enlightenment. It's just part of the journey. وَالْيَدَيْنِ وَالْقَدَمَيْنِ خُدَّامُهُ. And the limbs, the legs and the feet are its servants. وَالْعَقْلُ وَزِيرُهُ. And the aql is its minister. وَالشَّهْوَ عَامِلُهُ. And the shahwa, the desire, is its laborer. وَالْغَضَبْ شِحْنَتُهُ. And the ghadab, the anger, is its police force. The shahwa is the laborer because it is through the desire that the body is maintained also, because you desire food and you need to eat food for the body to survive. You desire drink, you need to drink so that the body can survive. There are a lot of other desires included in there, like sleep and copulation, that are necessary for the body's survival, but they have to be in moderation. That's the point. And the ghadab, the anger, the emotions are there as its protecting police force, because you need to feel emotion. You cannot be a hollow being. If something is happening that is wrong, you need to feel the anger in order to fight it. But it has to be controlled. The anger has to be directed in the appropriate way. وَالْحَوَاسُ جَوَاسِيسُهُ. And the senses are its spies. The jassa is the probe. In the root word of jassa, it means probe. It's the probe. So your senses are always probing the environment for information, for visual information, for auditory information. All this information comes in raw data and it is absorbed into the brain. And that's what he's going to talk about in the next line. وَكُلُّ وَاحِدٌ مُوَكِّلٌ بِعَالَمٍ مِنْ عَوَالِمْ يَجْمَعُ لَهُ أَحْوَالَ الْأَوَالِمِ. Every one of these components has been given a dominion from amongst all these dominions, so that the heart can gather and collectively maintain all these dominions. And he says, وَقُوَّ الْخَيَالِ فِي مُقَدَّمَ الدِّمَاغ. Now he's talking about the brain. The quwa khayal is the faculty of imagination. And it is in the frontal portion of the brain, what we would call the neocortex. And that's the portion of the brain that is responsible for for sensory cognition, for speech, for motor function, like the limbs and controlling the body parts. That's the foremost portion of the brain that deals with the senses. All the information that comes in from the senses goes to the frontal cortex. So وقوى الخيال في مقدمة الدماغ. The imaginative faculty resides in the frontal portion of the brain. Now, the imaginative faculty itself is part of the aql. It's not part of the brain. The brain is just an organ. This is important to understand, that when we say dimagh, we're talking about brain. When we say aql, we're talking about the intellect, the mind, and these are two separate entities. The aql has got 5 collective faculties: the imaginative faculty, the estimative faculty, memory and recollection, the common sense, and the emotive faculty. And these are the 5 faculties that deal with the respective departments of either formulating images in thought, estimating or calculating, dealing with emotions or recognizing different emotions, memory and recollection, and then the common sense is what deals with the information received from all the 5 senses. All the 5 senses information is collected in what's known as the common sense. This is part of the mind. The mind uses the brain as a tool. So when he says that the manzil of the mind, the place where it alights, the manzil of the mind is in the brain, it doesn't mean that you will find the mind in the brain if you cut it open. That's not what it means. It means that that's its portion, that's its allocated dominion, that's its tool. The mind is in the heart, it's in the spiritual heart. You're not going to find it if you cut open the body. Or if you cut open the brain, or if you cut open the pineal gland, you're going to find consciousness there. That's not what it means. It means that the brain is a tool and the mind uses it as a tool. So this frontal portion of the brain, it uses it for cognition. It uses it to collect information from the senses. It uses it to form the images that it is going to cognize. It uses it to actuate. So it uses it to sense and to actuate the limbs and the body parts as and when it is necessary, or as and how it requires. وقوى الخيال في مقدمة الدماغ كالنقيب يجمع عنده أخبار الجواسيس. It's like a chief. So this frontal cortex, the imaginative faculty, is like the chief. It gathers with it all the information that is received from the senses, from the spies. Al-Jawasis, which is the senses. So all the information received from the senses is gathered in the frontal cortex. وقوى الحفظ في وسط الدماغ مثل صاحب الخريطة يجمع الرقاع من يد النقيب ويحتفظها إلى أن يعرضها على العقل. The faculty of memory is in the central portion of the brain. And this is like the map master, the one who makes the map. And it collects all the information and all the pieces that it receives from the chief, who is the imaginative faculty. And it preserves them and to be later presented to the aql. So the frontal cortex receives all the information from the senses. Whatever the eyes see, whatever the ears hear, all that information is received to the frontal cortex. And then the middle cortex, which is dealing with the memory, it is like the map master. It collects all these bits and pieces of information, and it is what puts all the pieces together. Oh, at this time I heard this, and at this time we saw that, and at this time I said this. So it puts all the pieces together. And then when the aql, when the mind requires that information, it has it all pieced together like a map to be presented to the mind. فإذا بلغت هذه الأخبار إلى الوزير يرى أحوال المملكة على مقتضاها. So in order for the mind to access reality, in order for it to be able to analyze what is the reality out there, this is how it would do this. It would request the information from the brain to put all the pieces together, to analyze it, and then to present its findings to the heart, who will be the final decision maker. فإذا رأيت واحدا منهم قد عسى عليك مثل الشهوة والغضب فعليك بالمجاهدة ولا تقصد قتلهما. So if you see that any one of these is rebelling against you, like the desires or the emotions, the anger, then it is upon you to struggle to suppress this rebellion. It is on you as the heart, it is upon the heart, you yourself, that if you find that your desires are fighting against your will, your intellective will, in other words, you've actually looked at everything and you've come to the conclusion that this is right and this is wrong, and yet your desires are saying, no, 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 I want that. Or your anger is saying in that moment, no, 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 I want to fight, I want to rebel, I want to do some damage. If you find that they're fighting against you, they're rebelling against you, then it is upon you to suppress the rebellion, because that's what the king has to do. If it's going to face a coup from its military arm, then he has to do all that he can to suppress the coup, otherwise he's going to be overthrown. Or if there's politics being played in his administration and they are trying to de-seat him, to impeach him, then he has to do everything he can to make sure that doesn't happen, otherwise they're going to overthrow him. So your emotions or your desires are going to overthrow you, they're going to overpower you. Now guess what? They don't have the intellective capabilities. They cannot think for themselves, they cannot reason. So how exactly are they going to govern you? They can't govern you, they're just going to ruin you. They're going to make a mess of everything. So as soon as you start feeling this sense of there is a rebellion afoot, there are riots taking place, then you have to do everything in your power to suppress the rebellion of the shahwa and the ghadab. But he says, وَلَا تَقْصِدْ قَتَلَهُمَا. But that doesn't mean that you kill them. In other words, you suppress them and control them, but don't kill them off, because they're necessary. You need them for your survival. You need those emotions. You need those desires, that drive. And he's going to explain later on what happens when the desires are uncontrolled and the anger is uncontrolled, what happens. And then what also happens when they are deficient, when they're not up to par, when they're not performing the way they should perform. That's also detrimental to the self. لأن المملكة لا تستقر إلا بهما. Because the dominion cannot find stability without them. The dominion needs them. The body requires it. The self needs it. So he says, فَإِذَا فَعَلْتَ ذَلِكَ كُنْتَ سَعِيدًا. If you do this, if you follow this principle, all this that he has highlighted, placing the shahwa and the ghadab under the authority of the aql, ensuring that you are in constant communication with your aql and you're analyzing things properly, and at the same time you're also improving the aql through ilm and learning, ensuring that your departments, your troops are kept under control. If you do all this, then you will find your happiness. You will be happy. You will find that contentment, that peace and tranquility that you're looking for. وَأَعْدَيْتَ حَقَّ النِّعْمَةِ, and you will be able to fulfill that right of this ni'mah that Allah has given you. وَوَجِبَتْ لَكَ الْخِلْعَةُ فِي وَقْتِهَا. Then ultimately, in time, this robe of honor is going to descend on you. However, وَإِلَّا كُنْتَ شَقِيًّا. If not, then you are damned. وَوَجِبَ عَلَيْكَ النَّكَالِ وَالْعُقُوبَةِ. For you, upon you, is going to be punishment and chastisement. Is there any question up until there? That's a lot of information to pack into one single page. But he's going to explain each component later on, so more and more of it is going to be made easier to understand. But is there any question up until there?
Zainab is asking just if you can repeat the last.
Okay, where did you want me to repeat from?
If you do all of this,
Okay, so he said, فَإِذَا فَعَلْتَ ذَلِكَ كُنْتَ سَعِيدًا. If you do all this, if you ensure that your heart is the one that is in charge, that is the sultan, that sits as a king and acts as a king, and it is not corrupt, because you can also have corrupt leaders, you can have corrupt kings. And he's going to talk about the diseases of the heart that corrupt the heart. Those also need to be taken care of. But if you do this and you ensure that your shahwa and your ghadab are kept under the control of your aql, in other words, your mind is what determines and analyzes and does the thinking and corresponds with the heart, and then you consult with your mind to make the right decision, ultimately you will be able to find your contentment, your happiness, and the peace and tranquility that you're looking for. وَأَدَيْتَ حَقَّ النِّعْمَةِ, and you will be able to fulfill the right of this favor that Allah has given you, to rise above the material, the causal world, to the highest of the highest ranks. وَوَجِبَتْ لَكَ الْخِلْعَةُ فِي وَقْتِهَا, and in time this robe of honor is going to descend upon you. وَإِلَّا كُنْتَ شَقِيًّا, if not, then you are damned. وَوَجِبَ عَلَيْكَ النَّكَالِ وَالْعُقُوبَةِ, you're going to face, upon you is going to be punishment and chastisement. Is that clear?
Yes, and what are the components? What are the components again?
The components of?
aql.
Okay, so he said, قوة الخيال في مقدمة الدماغ. The imaginative faculty, the khayal, the thought that we say, in Urdu it's khayal, right? The thought or the immediate thought process takes place in the frontal cortex of the brain, the neocortex. And it is like a chief, كالنقيب يجمع عنده أخبار الجواسيس. All the information that the senses collect, that his spies collect, are gathered in this frontal cortex. So everything that you see, that you hear, you taste, you smell, you touch, you feel, all these is information from the outside world in terms of auditory information, visual information, sound, wavelength, frequency, intensity, temperature. All this information that the senses collect is delivered to this frontal cortex, which is responsible for motor skills, sensory perception, for cognition, for motor skills, or generating these motor commands that go into the hands, the legs, the movement, language and speech. So it's the frontal cortex that activates the vocal cords when you want to speak. So all this information is gathered in this frontal cortex, which is like the chief now. So the chief is out there and he's collecting all the information from the people. And then وَقُوَّ الْحِفْظِ فِي وَسَطِ الدِّمَاغِ, the power of memory and recollection is in the central portion of the brain. That's where the memory resides and recollection. مِثْلُ صَاحِبَ الْخَرِيطَةِ, he's like the map maker or the map master, the one who puts all the pieces together and builds this map of information. يَجْمَعُ الرِّكَعَ مِنْ يَدَّ النَّقِيبِ, it puts all the pieces that it has received from the chief. وَيَحْتَفِظُهَا إِلَى أَنْ يَعْرِضُهَا عَلَى الْعَقْلِ, so it keeps everything ready for when the aql requires that information. So you saw certain things, you looked at something, and all that something is light bouncing off that object and entering into your eyes. The information that your brain is going to collect is the light intensity, the texture, the shape, the wavelength, the color information, all these particulars. That's the information collected. So the memory is going to take all that information after the imaginative faculty has formed the image of what was seen. And so the memory is going to store that. Now this is all happening in real time. It's not progressive in terms of an algorithm. There's no time lapse between them. When you're watching or you're looking or you're hearing, your memory the memory faculty is working at the same time. And this is why people who have photographic memory, their memory is really sharp, because as soon as they see it, it's already saved. For other people, it takes time. You have to look at it several times or listen to it several times before it finally is completely pieced together. So it puts all these pieces together, builds a map, and keeps it ready for when the mind requires it. فإذا بلغت هذا الأخبار إلى الوزير يرى أحوال المملكة على مقتضاها. So that it can use this information to assess reality, to analyze reality regarding its requirements, what it needs to do and how it needs to do it. So it analyzes, okay, I saw this, what does this mean? What does that mean? So when you have knowledge of things, when you study things and then you see them in the real world, then the mind knows what it is and what it needs to do, right? It's able to categorize everything, and when the heart inquires from it, it has everything ready, so that the heart can then understand and make a decision on what needs to be done. فإذا رأيت واحدا منهم قد عسى عليك مثل الشهوة والغضب فعليك بالمجاهدة ولا تقصد قتلهما لأن المملكة لا تستقر إلا بهما. If you see that any one of these are rebelling against you, like the shahwa or the ghadab, they are rebelling against you, they're trying to overpower you. You're in a situation whereby somebody said something and now you're getting angry, despite that's not what you want to do. Your heart doesn't want that. The heart doesn't want to get angry. The heart wants to be tranquil. The heart wants to be calm. The heart wants to be happy. So when you're getting angry and that anger is not being controlled, it's now rebelling against your will, because you have an option. You always have a choice. Somebody says something to you, the instinctive response is usually fight and flee, or fight or flee, right? So that's the brain's function. The intellect is what analyzes the situation and decides whether or not it is a flight situation or a fight situation. Do I run away or do I fight back? The anger, if it is not controlled, will often want to fight back. So some people who cannot control that will fight back. They'll either hit the other person, or they'll argue with the other person, or they shout, or they'll insult, or they'll abuse. They'll come up with all this other hatred that comes from them. So that is the ghadab, rebelling against the heart, because the heart doesn't want to do that. But because the heart is not strong enough, it's not able to control them. So what he's saying is, if you see as the king, because you are the king, you are the heart, if you see that these departments are fighting against you, they are rebelling against you, you have to suppress the rebellion. Otherwise, what's going to happen is they're going to overthrow you. There's going to be a coup and you're going to be dethroned. Then you've lost it. And so you see people losing it, right? They see food and they can't control themselves. They get into fights and they can't control themselves. They want to argue all the time. They don't know why they're arguing. They just want to argue. They want to just quarrel. They just want to do all these things because the king is not strong enough to control his kingdom. So if you manage to put all these things in check, then you will be able to find your happiness. And in time, you will find this stability, this tranquility. And that tranquility is an-nafs al-mutma'inna. It is the soul that is tranquil. That's the robe of honor that he's talking about. Because Allah says, Ya ayyatuhan nafsul mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah. Pleased and pleasing. He's pleased with that. That's a bestowing of a robe of honor on the being, because he's pleased with that soul that is tranquil. That's what you want to aim for. So the next section, it's a short section, so we'll finish with this inshallah. ثلاثة أشياء تبنى عليها السعادة. The three things that this happiness is based or built upon. So he says, تمام السعادة مبني على ثلاثة أشياء. The complete felicity or this complete joy is built on three things. قوة الغضب, قوة الشهوة, وقوة العلم. the faculty or the power of irascibility, the emotional faculty, the faculty of shahwa, of desire, and the faculty or the power of knowledge, or the aql in this case. So you can see here, even though he's looking at these two as negative, they are seen as negative because they are not intellective. So they have to be controlled, but they are very important, and they partake in your quest to seek out your felicity, your contentment. فَيَحْتَاجُ أَنْ يَكُونَ أَمْرَهَا مُتَوَسِّطًا. It is important that these are all balanced. It's important that these are balanced. لِأَلَّا تَزِيدَ قُوَّةَ الشَّهْوَةِ فَتُخْرِجُهُ إِلَى الرَّخْصِ فَيَهْلِكْ. If it so happens that the quwa shahwa is uncontrolled, it's incremental, and it's not kept in check, it's going to lead to you being destroyed. It's going to lead to your destruction. It's going to lead to a situation where you are arrakhs. You're too lenient. You're not controlling yourself in the sense that you become lax. You don't have the drive anymore, and that results in your destruction. أو تزيد قوة الغضبية فتخرجه إلى الجموع فيهلك. Or it can lead the ghadab to a deficiency whereby it is defiant, like Iblis. Just don't want to do it. Teenagers usually fall in this category because they are not controlled. This is an important thing Imam Ali said about children. And this is parenting 101 from one of the four Khalifas. So I think it deserves some recognition from parents. He said, play with them for 7, and then discipline them for 7, and then counsel them for 7. So for the first 7 years of their lives, the children's life, he said, play with them. Be friendly with them. Build a rapport with them. Build a trust with them. So that when it comes to the next 7 years, where they are in this position of a drastic change in their body, where they have uncontrolled hormonal imbalances taking place, which affects the soul, it results in a lot of confusion. Part of it is not their fault, but that's the change that the human being goes through. They're in a situation whereby they tend to rebel a lot, and they tend to go too much into their desires. He says this is the 7th period where you want to discipline them. And discipline here does not mean crime for punishment. It doesn't mean you beat them. It doesn't mean you lock them up, or you shout at them, or you suppress them. No, it means discipline these faculties, discipline the shahwa, discipline the desires, show them how to control themselves, explain to them where they're going wrong. And the first 7 years that you spend building trust with them are more than important now, because you need them to trust you when you're telling them, look, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. Because when the ghadab and the shahwa are uncontrolled and the heart cannot control them, then you as a being are unable to determine the outcome and consequences of your actions. Because it's the intellect that is able to determine consequences. It's the intellect that is able to determine outcomes from actions. If the intellect is not in place, then the ghadab and shahwa, which do not do any thinking whatsoever, will not be able to determine the consequences of the action. So a lot of mistakes that teenagers make end up being life burdens for them. So this is the period he says you should be disciplining them. Disciplining these components. Showing them how to control these components. Because if you don't do it at this stage, you will never be able to do it. And in the 3rd stage, he says counsel them. Because now they have moved past the discipline stage. They've been able to regulate their angers, their emotions, their desires. And now they're using their mind to think. That's the age when they are now coming out into the world to understand the reality of what they are going to encounter. That's the age you want to counsel them. You want to advise them. You want to show them which direction they should take. Because now they are mature and they can comprehend reason. They can understand reason, so you reason with them. فإذا توسط القوتان بإشارة قوة العلم دل على طريق الهداية. If these are balanced, these two powers, these two faculties, if they are balanced by the ishara, by the indication of the ilm, by the aql, if they are balanced and they are indicated and they are balanced, they are guided by the intellect, then they will follow, or the being is going to follow the path of guidance, the divine guidance, the hidayah. وكذلك الغضب إذا زاد سهل عليه الضرب والقتل. So in the first instance, if it is deficient, it's going to result in defiancy. All right. And so now in this instance, if it is excessive, then the being is going to want to fight and kill and cause carnage and mayhem. That is the yafsiku dima, uncontrollable rage that results in bloodshed. وَإِذَا نَقَصَ ذَهَبَتُ الْغَيْرَ وَالْحَمِيَّةِ فِي الدِّينِ وَالدُّنْيَا. And if it is deficient, it will not have the zeal and that passion in deen or in dunya. So if it is uncontrolled, it's going to cause carnage. If it is deficient, it will not have the passion and the fire and the zeal to do the struggle that it needs to do in deen and in dunya. So again, you need it, right? It's not all that bad, but you need to control it. وَإِذَا تَوَسَّطَ كَانَ الصَّبْرُ وَالشَّجَاعَةُ وَالْحِكْمَةُ. And if it is balanced, so he's giving you all three scenarios. What happens when it is excessive? What happens when it is deficient? And then what's going to happen if it is balanced? So if it is balanced, it's going to have sabr. It's going to have patience and courage and prudence, hikmah. And these are known as the cardinal virtues. Ummahat al-fada'il, which are four: hikmah, shaja'a, iffa, and adala. Prudence or wisdom, courage or fortitude, chastity or temperance, abstinence, which is also sabr, and adala, justice. When the first three are balanced, hikmah, shaja'a, and iffa. When you have hikmah, you have wisdom, you have bravery, and you have control on your desires, chastity. Then when these three are balanced, then you will have adala. You will have justice, or you will do justice unto yourself. Instead of being dhalimun li nafsi, unjust to yourself. So going back to Adam and Hawa, when they ate from the fruit, what was it that drove them? It wasn't anger. It wasn't emotion. They weren't rebelling against God. It was a play on desire. Iblis was playing on their desire. So it was a desire to just want to eat and see what's going to happen, just to take it. That's the taste of it. And so what did they do in their dua? رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. We did an injustice unto ourselves, our inner selves. If you control it, then you will do a justice unto yourself, not an injustice. And so these three components, the shuja'a is related to the ghadab, to the anger. If the anger is uncontrolled, then it ends up in rage and foolhardiness, acting without thinking, argumentation, reaction, fighting back. And if it is deficient, then it's going to end up in cowardice. If it is balanced, then the individual is brave, is courageous. That's a virtue. That's the balance. For the desires, if it is uncontrolled, then the individual becomes impatient, gluttonous, overconsumption, uncontrolled desire for food and copulation, a desire for this sensory experience. If it is deficient, it becomes too lenient, it becomes lazy, it doesn't have a drive, doesn't want to do things. There's a weakness, an inability. And if it is balanced, then the individual has got iffa, has got chastity, is able to abstain themselves. They have sabr, they have patience. When all these three are balanced, then there is adala, there is justice on the being. So he says, وَكَذَلِكَ الشَّهْوَةِ إذا زادت, likewise if the shahwa is increased, كان الفسق والفجور, it results in profligacy, in immorality, in transgressing the boundaries. So in Surah Al-Kahf, ayah number 50, he says, Allah, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ كَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ فَفَسَقَ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. When Allah told the angels to prostrate, they all prostrated to Adam, except Iblis. He was from the jinn, and he transgressed the command of his Lord. فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. This fisk, profligacy, is like you've got the boundaries, you've got what the rules say, but you want to take a more liberal approach. No, we want to be a bit lax. We want to chill, we're a bit laid back. You don't want to be laid back in this dunya, because this dunya is not your abode to be laid back and to be luxurious and to relax and to be in comfort. That's not what this dunya is for. And if you fall into that, then you're causing harm unto yourself. You're causing an injustice to yourself. Because deen and dunya is mujahada. It is a struggle, a constant struggle. وَإِذَا نَقَصَتْ كَانَ الْعَجْزُ وَالْفُطُورُ. If it is deficient, it's going to end up in laziness, in weakness, in an inability. There's no drive, there's no push forward. There's a lack of interest. Just don't want to do it. I don't want to even try it. A lot of people do this when they're faced with challenges. They just give up in the immediate sense. I can't do it. I don't have it. But you haven't even tried it yet. Because there's no drive, there's no passion. إن توسطت كان العفة والقناعة وأمثل ذلك. If it is balanced, then you will experience moderate satisfaction. And that's the end of the chapter. So, what I want to explain, if you can see it on the board, if you can see my scribblings there, if you can write that down, that will be very helpful. Okay, you can just take a picture, but I would prefer that you write it down. But let me just explain what it means. So you've got basically 3 sets of weaknesses in general, and all 3 sets are related to the quwa ghadabiyya, the quwa shahwa, shahwaniya, and the quwa aqaliya. The irascible faculty, the concupiscent faculty, and the intellective faculty. So the first weakness is a moral weakness. Ithm. Al-ithm is sin. So when the shahwa is not controlled, then what results is immorality or sinfulness. That's the transgressing of the boundaries. You end up into fisq and fujur, which is immorality. So that's an immoral or a moral weakness. If the heart is weak and is not able to control the desires, then the resultant will be somebody who is heavily drowning in sin. The second is an emotional weakness, and that's related to the quwa ghadabiyya. So when the ghadab is not controllable, then the individual has an emotional weakness. Now this can go both ways. It can go towards the extreme of anger and rage, but it can also go towards the other extreme of this softness, this internal weakness. And that's a natural thing for most people who have sensitive hearts, and women in general who are sensitive to their children and their family as a whole. And this is why women are the integral pillar of society and of the family, because their sensitivity is what holds everything together. Now, what's interesting about this is that a lot of us make mistakes. We don't even realize that those mistakes are fixed, or that we are saved from having to go to either extreme, without really knowing how it is that we manage to escape that transgression. And this is because Allah is fa'alun lima yurid. He is the doer of what he wills, means he can intervene whenever he wants. And a lot of people don't recognize that Allah actually intervenes. The number of times your Lord has intervened to save you, if you only thought about it, you would be amazed. There is absolutely no way that you can disbelieve in Him. And I'll give you a very profound example from the Quran of Allah intervening in a moment of emotional weakness. Not because the individual could not control their desires, but because it was a situation or a circumstance in which they just could not handle it. And this is where a lot of people fall into. It's not really a matter of being unable to control the self. It's really a matter of having a heart that is strong enough to deal with a situation, which results in people getting different kinds of problems manifesting in their lives. So this example is of Nabi Musa's mother. At the point where Fir'aun's wife picked up the baby, Musa alayhi salam, and wanted to raise him as her own child. وَقَالَتِ امْرَأَةُ فِرْعَوْنَ قُرَّةُ عَيْنٍ لِي وَلَكَ. And Fir'aun's wife said, he's going to be the delight of my eye. He's going to be قُرَّةُ عَيْنٍ لِي. He's going to be the delight of the eye for me and for you. لا تقتلوه عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا وهم لا يشعرون. Don't kill him. He could, be of benefit to us, or that we may then take him as a son. But they did not really know who they were picking up. But who's watching by hiding, and who's watching what's happening? It's his mother. وَأَصْبَحَ فُؤَادُ أُمِّ مُوسَى فَارِغًا. See what happened to Musa's mother? Her heart suddenly became empty. فَارِغًا. Her heart became empty. She just lost it. She couldn't control herself. Imagine your child being picked up by somebody else. You know what that means. What that could do to you as a woman. So somebody else is taking your child. What does that do to your heart? You lose it. You can't control yourself. But Allah is fa'alun lima yurid. And He says, إِن كَادَتْ لَتُبْدِي بِهِ لَوْلَا أَنْ رَبَّتْنَا عَلَى قَلْبِهَا لِتَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. She was about to let it go. She was about to lose control and just run out and fight for her child and disclose it. No, he's my child. What would have happened? Fir'aun would have killed the child, because that's the edict he had issued, to kill all Hebrew children, right? Because of the prophecy he had received. And she was about to go out and disclose it and say, no, he's not your son, he's my son. Fir'aun would have killed him. But Allah intervened at that moment. And he says, أَنْ رَبَّتْنَا عَلَى قَلْبِهَا. We strengthened her heart. We made her heart steadfast so that she could withstand that circumstance. لِتَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So that she would be amongst the mu'mineen. Who are the mu'mineen? They are those who have qalbun salim. They are those who have a sound heart. So Allah can intervene whenever He wants. And this is why the believer should never lose hope in a moment or a circumstance that is overwhelming or overburdening them. But that the believer has exhausted all possible options that are available to them, and then surrender to the will of Allah. So it's not always a case of being sinful, or always a case of being transgression, or always a case of not being able to control yourself in the general sense. Sometimes it's just human nature. But a sound heart can enable you to go through the circumstance. And this is why on the believer it is important to work towards strengthening your heart from the very beginning. So if you look on the board, there's a small equation that I've written there. And it's in a straight line. I put it in a straight line for illustration purposes only, but that's not exactly how it transpires. So you've got the senses that respond to the brain. And then you've got the brain that responds to the aql. And then you've got the aql, the mind, that responds to the heart. This is the chain of authority. The senses are the primary receivers of the information. The brain processes and computes that information, to use computer terminology, it computes and processes that information. The mind analyzes it and interprets that information, that data. It puts everything together. And then the heart is what does the comprehension. The heart comprehends and understands and then makes the final decision. If from the initial point the information is overwhelming and the heart at the final recipient is not able to handle it, then the manifestation of the negative manifestation, the detriment, the harm goes down the chain. In other words, when you see something happening or you hear something happening that you have not trained your heart to be strong enough to handle, then you will not be able to control your ghadab and your shahwa. And what's going to end up happening is that there will be a negative manifestation down the line. If the heart is not in control, then the body is going to suffer. The kingdom is going to deteriorate. The city is going to fall apart. The soul, which is the city, Al-Madinah, it's going to fall apart. The body is going to fall apart. It's going to deteriorate. So in this regard, when the heart is not able to handle things, people tend to fall into automated behavior. They become automatons. They become reactionary objects. So they just react to information received. They react to impulses. And the evil forces, they know this. They know the people's behaviors and traits. Like, so on social media, you get certain information and postings that come up. They're not there to give you a nice time. They're there to prompt a certain reaction. And people do react, with their comments, and keyboard warriors and all the hoo-ha, the fitna that gets created because of this. People do react to these things. And what Ghazali is trying to say here is he's challenging you to fully realize your conscious self and your conscious being, your humanity, to find that humanity and to control that humanity and to perfect it. Because Allah has said, لِنَبْلُوَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. He wants to know who is going to be the best of you. Who is going to really show that I created the perfect being. And he's got people, great exemplars, who have attained that rank, that whose advice we can follow. Imam Al-Ghazali and others like him included, whose examples we can follow in terms of how do you actually attain that rank. Because people who are facing these difficulties in life, whereby there are manifestations taking place like depression and anxiety and agitation, and then they get worsened and they get compounded, and then they result in bodily manifestations, like epilepsy in this case. You can treat the symptoms. You might even be able to find a cause within the body that's causing that, like a tumor or a nervous disorder, something to do with the body. But in many cases, you find that if you're able to fix the root cause, then you will fix the chain of transmission. You will fix this algorithm. If you can strengthen the heart to be able to have a greater forbearance, a greater capacity to withstand the hits of life, then the expansion of the heart will result also in the expansion of the mind. And the more knowledge you acquire, and I'm not talking about academics insofar as secular academics are concerned, engineering and mathematics and medicine is a virtuous science, no doubt about it, as far as the community is concerned. We're talking about ma'rifatullah, knowledge of Allah. And ma'rifatullah is not a set of argumentations, discourse and thesis. It's not a matan or a sharh written by someone. These are all there in the books, they can be studied. Ma'rifatullah is mushahada. It is a state of witnessing the divine presence. That's what you want to aim for. When you acquire knowledge in that capacity or in that direction, or you are seeking knowledge in that line, then it increases your level of intellection from causal effectual to spiritual intelligence, to higher intelligence. And the higher the intelligence, the greater the hilm, the forbearance. Hilm is intelligence. Hilm means intelligence. Hilm also means forbearance. And the Prophet ﷺ had the greatest of forbearance. And he was an illiterate man. He didn't have book knowledge. And yet he was able to withstand so much as an individual, as a human being, a prophet of Allah, to maintain his duties as a prophet and deal with society and deal with rejection and deal with the Jews and the Christians and the polytheists, the idol worshippers, and also to deal with day-to-day circumstances amongst his people, to resolve their issues, to help guide them along, and also to fulfill his wajibat, his fara'id aspects, because there were things that were made wajib for the Prophet that were not made wajib for everyone else. He had to fulfill them. To deal with all that, you need someone who is strong on the inside. When the intellection is high, it is able to deduce that moment. It is able to calculate fast. It is able to estimate better. It is able to decide what needs to be done in this moment. Should I be angry? Should I walk away? Should I do it in another way? The intellection will find a way to resolve the issue. So long as the issue remains unresolved, it troubles the heart. And it continues to trouble the heart. It compounds and compounds and compounds until it bursts out. And then it manifests in any number of ways. It can manifest on the soul and it will destroy the soul. It can manifest on the body and it will destroy the body. And this is what Ghazali is saying. If the king is not in control of its dominion, if the Malik, the Sultan, is not in control of his dominion, he is not strong, he is not intelligent, he is not smart enough, he doesn't have the charisma, he doesn't have the strength and the wisdom to deal with his subjects, then the politicians he has put in place are going to destroy the city. The police force he has put in place are going to destroy the kingdom. Let's end here, inshallah. If there's no other question, let's end here. And then we'll carry on from the next session. I'd like you guys to give this a bit more thought and to look at practical examples individually and then come up with questions that we can put to the test. We can put to Ghazali's text and see, can we actually resolve some of these issues on a universal level? We don't want to work out particulars. We want to look at it from a universal perspective, from an objective level, and see if we can actually find a way to resolve them. So let's end there, inshallah. Subhanaka wa bihamdika la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.